more shocked than anything. You know what I'm saying? But I wasn't more
Welcome to The Undercurrent, your source for grassroots news. I'm Lauren Windsor. Joining me today is Ben Mansky. He's the Executive Director of the Liberty Tree Foundation. He's also on the National Executive Committee for Move to Amend. Move to Amend, viewers will remember, is an organization dedicated to campaign finance reform, eliminating corporate personhood, and overturning Citizens United. Ben was also the campaign manager for Jill Stein in the Green Party presidential campaign in 2012. Welcome.
Hey, it's
Thank
great
you for
to be
joining
here,
us.
Lauren. Yeah, thank you.
So we'll talk about the Stein campaign, then we'll talk more broadly about the Green Party, and then get to Move to Amend.
Okay.
So I was first acquainted with you through an investigative piece that I did about Roseanne Barr's run. How did her candidacy affect Jill's campaign?
Well, it meant that we had to get into campaign mode much earlier than we would have otherwise. Jill Stein was somebody who was approached by many leading figures in the Green Party around the country to run for president, to seek our party's nomination. But when Roseanne Barr made the decision that she was going to challenge Dr. Stein and other candidates who were seeking the nomination early in 2012, that totally changed our campaign strategy. We had been focused on building the party, on getting the party on the ballot in more states. When we started the campaign, the Green Party was only on the ballot in just over a dozen states, I think 16 states. And we were, I think it's fair to say, the major factor in organizing petition drives around the country to bring the choice of voting Green to voters, to hundreds of millions of voters around the country. But when Roseanne Barr got into the race, we had to take her seriously because she's one of the most recognized names in America.
Right. So according to OpenSecrets.org, Obama raised more than $700 million, Romney nearly $450 million. This is not including super PAC money.
Right.
And then the Stein campaign raised less than $900,000. 900,000. So the disparity here is enormous with fundraising, with media attention. How are you able to grapple with those disparities as a campaign manager?
Well, to some extent, we weren't able to. To think about starting a national presidential campaign in which you intend to take it as far as you can go, and yet you're the only person on staff. And then for a matter of months, you're relying almost entirely on volunteer labor at the national level, as well as at the grassroots. You really just have to build step by step and develop capacity. And what we found in the course of the campaign was that the main driver of the growth of Jill Stein's campaign was the demand for the Green Party and the fact that she and Sherry Honkala were excellent representatives for the social change that we represent. And so we were able over time to move from bringing in a couple $1,000s a month at the beginning of the campaign to several $100,000 a month at the end. Now, when you compare that with the establishment, where not only do they have well over $1 billion between the two of them that they spent directly, but then billions and billions of dollars that was spent with outside money, with corporate money largely, to pick which of the two candidates, Wall Street versus Dallas preferred. It's not even a question about being drowned. We're operating at a totally different level. We are an insurgency. We'll remain that. But one thing that we look at is we do look at the dollar per vote, and from that standpoint, Jill Stein won hands down.
Well, Jill was a huge supporter of Occupy. She was arrested 3 times over the course of the campaign. Was this part of your strategy for earned media and for grappling with those disparities? Let's really go out after the activist vote?
Well, I think that we definitely are a party that has its base in the movement. And so to separate the Green Party from the movement is almost impossible. Greens are always there.
And when you say the movement, you mean Occupy?
I mean Occupy.
Or the progressive movement.
The progressive movement, the democracy movement, the anti-war movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the labor movement, the broad movement for change that is seeking to put the majority of people in our place as the folks who actually run this country, right? And so Greens are involved in all those movements and always have been. If you were to identify the 20 most prominent anti-war activists in the country, almost to a last one, they are Greens. And so for Jill to go out there and for Sherry to go out there and to raise up Occupy, to actually bring media to Occupy sites. I remember traveling with her in Delaware, and it was front page news, the biggest story, that a presidential candidate had come to Delaware and she had gone to Occupy in order to show her support, is natural. And there is a natural link between the electoralism of the Green Party as this insurgent party that can't be bought. We're playing the hard way, we're playing against the rules that have been set up, and the type of insurgency you've seen in the streets in America these last several years.
How did you choose the particular issues that she would be arrested for? I mean, I assume this was planned out.
Well, I mean, I think that there were many situations in which she could have been facing arrest. And it's just like anybody who goes into a situation in which you decide to take risks and you decide which risks to take. It's certainly the case that at the very end of the campaign, when she traveled to Texas to join the Keystone blockade, the blockade of the Keystone pipeline construction that's taking place there, and to bring supplies to them, that was to bring attention to the fact that President Obama and Mitt Romney have been promoters of policies that are making the climate crisis much worse. And as we've just heard, it seems likely that the Obama administration will be approving the Keystone pipeline. So Dr. Stein went there to bring attention to Keystone, to show her support, and again, the Green Party is the party of the movement at the ballot box. That's what we've always been. It's one of our greatest strengths. It's also can be a liability because we do elect Greens to office. We have several hundred Greens in office right now around the country, and we have this tension where we are trying to move into government yet remain in the streets at the same time.
Why does the Green Party run if they don't have a chance of winning?
Right.
So if you're a candidate for the Green Party and you know that you're not going to actually win, what is the desire to put yourself through that?
Well, I think there are a couple motivators. One of those is that you do have a long-term strategy to win. And the Greens do have that. And we do win races, and we tend to win local races. But what happens is that people see somebody like Dr. Stein on television, on current TV, or Young Turks, right? And they see them, they see Jill interviewed by you in the course of the campaign. And they think, that's really the party that represents my values, and they get involved and they decide to run for office, or they decide to support a local candidate, and those candidates get elected, and that's what's happening right now. So if you wanted to see if there's empirical evidence that Jill Stein's campaign had a positive impact in terms of moving the Green Party strategy forward, you would say, was there an increase in Green candidates following the campaign? Were more of those people elected? So far, so good this year. It's looking positive. But the other reason why people like Jill and many others, literally tens of thousands of people around the country, have stepped forward over the years to run as Greens is because we recognize that if we don't do it, nobody will. There will be no independent voice in our politics. And I think for Dr. Stein in particular, when President Obama said that he was going to put Social Security on the chopping block, his words, that was when she decided that she had to get in the race. And he was telling the truth. A lot of people didn't want to hear him, as we've seen, as he has put Social Security on the chopping block. And she was the voice for the 500,000 people who voted for her that we know of, and the millions of people who wish they had.
She got less than 1% of the vote. Nader hit the peak with 2%?
2.7 in 2000, yeah.
So how do you move upward towards 5% from there? If it felt like there was a lot of momentum in this particular election, but it didn't translate into the actual vote.
Well, if you were to look at it in relative terms, which is I think the comparison you were making just there, the reality is the Green Party had a near collapse in 2004. That there were some very difficult identity questions, and it took a long time for the party to get back on its feet.
But following Nader being blamed.
Yeah. Well, actually, interestingly, I was co-chair of the National Party from 2001 to 2004. The party grew enormously after the 2000 election. We doubled each year in party membership. Our budget doubled. The number of people who were running for office and elected doubled each year until 2004. But then Nader decided that he was going to run as an independent, and the Greens, we nominated our own candidate in David Cobb, and it was difficult. It was hard, and so the long and short of it is, it took a while for the Greens to get back on our feet. What's very positive about what happened in 2012 is that we actually did have a doubling. We doubled the vote totals. that the Greens had received in the previous election over what Representative Cynthia McKinney had accomplished in 2008. We more than doubled the amount of money that we raised. And I think Dr. Stein and Sherry Honkala were taken seriously by many members, not only of the voting public, but also the news media. I think that they showed that there's a seriousness to the Green Party, that we have something to offer. And so I think the test will be what happens in the next couple of years. And I'm optimistic about that, seeing, as what we've seen, many young people coming into the party. I'm now in my late 30s. I almost grew up in the Green Party. I joined when I was in high school over 20 years ago. And now there are people who are in their teens and early 20s who are young Greens, and they got to do it. They know that, and they're putting their shoulders to the wheel.
People want to see an independent party come out of the fray to challenge the two-party system. A Democrat friend of mine uses the acronym for GREEN: Get Republicans Elected Every November. So, given that success at the ballot box for the Green Party is a threat to the Democratic Party, how do you move forward with that reality?
Well, I think that that's not the reality in most of the country. I think that it was very interesting. I mean, I was on the Nader 2000 campaign staff, and I was the Midwest field director in 2000. And what we saw on the campaign was that the Democratic Party was putting tons of money into convincing people not to vote Green in states like California and Massachusetts. These were safe states. These were states there was no way, even with all the Koch brothers money that might have been deployed in that election, that Al Gore was going to lose those states. But yet there was an effort to suppress the Green vote. So for me, at that time, seeing that, it became pretty clear to me that it wasn't actually a serious criticism, that it was actually about just destroying a competitor. I mean, the reality is that elections are a multi-billion-dollar industry, not for us, but for those who are in mainstream electoral politics. And they have a lot to lose. And the Green Party does represent a challenge to the existing system. That said, the reality also is that in 95% of elections today, it's a one-party state, right? That if you go to Massachusetts, it's the Democratic Party über alles. And there's no reason for a progressive in Massachusetts to vote for a conservative, anti-choice Democrat over a progressive, quality Green candidate. And that's true in many districts, in fact, the majority of districts across the country. So, for example, I ran for state assembly in 2010, and the Democratic Party establishment crossed party lines to endorse me against their own nominee. Now, he won because of the way in which votes are counted in Wisconsin in that election. I did very well, but the mayor of the city of Madison endorsed me. The man who is now our U.S. Congressman, Mark Pocan, endorsed me. They did that because they don't see, those people are people who see the need to put progressive politics first, and they saw that a strong progressive Green could be a better ally for them than a corrupt Democrat. So I think that there's a need to rethink the way that we look at the Green Party. If we are, if somebody who's watching this right now thinks of themselves as a progressive Democrat, look at the Green Party as a potential ally, not just an adversary.
Well, I say this because when you look at challenges that you face as a campaign manager with Dr. Stein being refused participation in the presidential debate, when the committee that runs those debates is being controlled by Republicans and Democrats,
right,
and you have laws being made by Republicans and Democrats, how do you ever see them ceding power to allow you an opening to get in?
I think the vast majority of those Republicans and Democrats will not cede power without us taking it from them. And by those Republicans and Democrats, I mean those people who are in that multi-billion-dollar industry, the operatives. But the majority of people who consider themselves Democrats and Republicans, as well as the vast number of independents in this country, are not part of that game. And so for them, the Green Party offers an out. We offer an opportunity to stand up, to speak in our own voice, and to take on the political system. And so I think that the way in which we take on, for example, the Commission on Presidential Debates is by doing exactly what Jill Stein and Sherry Honkala did this past year, and tens of thousands of Americans did, which is to confront them, to demand debates which are independent, to organize them as the Free and Equal Foundation did, and other organizations did. They were able to bring international media to debates featuring Jill Stein and other candidates, Gary Johnson and the Libertarian Party. Very interesting debates. And I think that we saw that there was a demand for that. So for those who are interested in a strong progressive party being built in this country, what I would say to them is, it's hard work. It takes organizing. The system is stacked against you. The Greens have many problems, but they are problems, in my experience, that any independent party faces.
Right.
And I was a member of the New Party and the Labor Party in the 1990s. They were better funded than the Greens, but the Greens are here, I think, for a reason. We face an ecological crisis that encompasses all our other problems. And the Greens were made to address that crisis.
You gave me a great segue. I actually was going to ask you about this specifically, is that if we're talking about such grinding progress, that within 20 years as a party, you've really not made any significant gains. How do you get to the point of making your voice heard in these major issues that we have a clock ticking with climate change?
Right.
So I personally feel like we're staring down the barrel of a gun. And
we are.
It's going to take, we're on the precipice. It could take one major environmental catastrophe in San Francisco for LA to be wiped out with water supply, right? We get our water from San Francisco.
Right.
And can you imagine if we didn't have readily available water here? What kinds of different...
It'd be horrific.
It would. There would be looting. There would be violence. And I think people don't realize until they see something like Fukushima happen that all of our risk models don't take into account these very realistic events that will occur within our lifetime. I mean, how do you address that as a party that we really don't have the amount of time we think we do?
Well, the good thing is the Green Party is not on its own. Right? The Green Party is the electoral voice for this broader movement. There are others who have tried to offer that voice, but for various reasons, the Greens have been more successful than everybody else in the last 20 years. That said, it's not just a problem for the Greens, it's a problem for anybody who's concerned about the fact that people don't confront our problems until it's too late, too often, right?
So these are your signature issues.
Right.
Like as a party, climate change, a signature issue,
Yeah.
War, a signature issue. And what we're talking about that needs to happen to address each of these issues is not...
It's a total social transformation. It's a
We're
revolution.
talking about a paradigm.
A new economy,
A completely
new
new paradigm.
constitution, a new politics.
How do we get to the new paradigm?
Well, we do need a democratic revolution in the United States. And so when I was saying earlier, it's not just on the shoulders of the Green Party, most of my work is not within the Green Party. That's true of many Greens, right? I do work to build a democracy movement at the Liberty Tree Foundation. I do work with Move to Amend. I do work with other organizations and communities of activists. And we need that broader change. The Green Party is our way of expressing that demand at the ballot box. What I would say is the Greens have accomplished a number of things which I think the vast majority of people who vote Green don't even know. Our local elected officials were the first in the country to pass resolutions condemning the Patriot Act. Our local officials were the first to introduce sick leave ordinances of the type that is now law in New York City. Our local elected officials were first to pass resolutions condemning the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. And they did that not individually, but in a coordinated way. They talked to each other. And then others followed, members of other parties, nonpartisans. So the Greens have already had an impact that maybe hasn't even been seen. Fine, we don't get recognition for it, but I will just tell anybody who's watching that there are immediate gains from being involved with the Green Party right now. But then the other piece of it is there will be those moments, like you mentioned Fukushima. Well, after Fukushima, the Green Party in Japan took off, and it's become a major party in various regions of Japan. When there is a moment like that here in the US, and there will be more, we need there to be a strong electoral apparatus, an organization of people who understand ballot access laws, campaign finance laws, how to get people elected, that other folk can join in with. And so that's the value of the Green Party right now. And you want there to be people who are Green elected officials at the local level who you can work with to advance the movement.
So it's kind of like a shock doctrine sort of thing. You're just waiting for the right disaster
No, not at all. Yeah, but I mean,
to make a move.
I used to be infuriated when Marxists would tell me that, and I there's a lot of good stuff there, but I'd never identified as a Marxist, but they would always tell me, they'd say, structural conditions aren't ready. That we're not at a moment yet where people are ready to take to the streets in those numbers. And as an organizer, which I am at heart, I find it extremely frustrating. I always believe that you can do more. And I think we proved that with the Stein campaign this past election cycle. And we proved that in Wisconsin. I'm a Wisconsinite. And we organized the Wisconsin uprising. That was not spontaneous. We were going around and organizing meetings in the months before Scott Walker introduced the so-called budget repair bill. And that is why we were able to respond so quickly. So there are things that can always be done, but at the same time, as I get older, I've come to the recognition that there are also those moments in which everything changes. And part of what we have to do is to be ready for them. So for example, at Move to Amend, there's a community of people who have been working around the issue of corporate personhood and corporate constitutional rights for decades now. We know each other. And we knew that the Roberts Court was taking up Citizens United v. FEC, and there was going to be a bad decision, and we got ready for it. So we had MoveToAmend.org ready on the day that the decision came down. Myself and another attorney read the decision that night, and we came out with an analysis the next day, and 27,000 people had signed on within the first 2 days. So we do need to be opportunistic at the same time as being unwilling to take no for an answer.
What's the progress with Move to Amend?
There are some great things happening. We've had progress not only at the local level, at the state level, but now at Congress as well. Move to Amend, as I think many viewers know, has a bottom-up strategy. We began at the local level with ballot measures, and including ballot measures in my hometown. In Madison, Wisconsin was the first city, and Dane County, Wisconsin was the first county in the country to adopt measures calling for what is now known as the We the People Amendment. Amendment making clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and that money is not speech. Since Madison and Dane County passed those resolutions, nearly 500 local communities have done the same. And in fact, in Wisconsin this past election cycle, just last week, I got to see towns like Fort Atkinson and Whitewater and Chippewa County, which are not progressive citadels, also passed Move to Amend resolutions, in one case by 83% vote. This is a Republican district. So we continue to do the bottom-up work, not only in the Wisconsins of the world, but in the Illinois and the Arkansas and in every part of the country. But now that we've built capacity at the state level, we're now starting, at the local level, we're starting to move to the state level. So in the state of Minnesota, we've had success with the We the People Act, which is tied to the We the People Amendment, which is the amendment which Move to Amend is pushing. And our We the People Act, sponsored by Senator Marty, has gotten through all its committees. It's going to a floor vote, and we're very optimistic that it will be adopted. And what that does is it says to Congress, from the date on which half the states have adopted measures substantively similar to this one, you have 6 months to send the We the People Amendment to the states for ratification. If you fail to do that, we're convening a constitutional convention. So it's a way for the states to give Congress some time, but to not give Congress the keys to the process.
So you do want a constitutional convention?
We do. Move to Amend is a...
Because the whole movement's so divided between, do we do it legislatively? Do we...
This is the compromise.
Go nuclear. Jake actually wants to go nuclear and blow it up, have the constitutional convention.
Personally, I don't see it as going nuclear. I think it's great. And Move to Amend is genuinely a coalition. So there are hundreds of organizations that have signed on. The national leadership is representative of dozens of national organizations, including Liberty Tree. That's where I come in. And there are different points of view. And we are not only very diverse in terms of our backgrounds and in terms of what parts of the country we come from, but also in terms of our viewpoints. So what we've come up with, the We the People Act in Minnesota and similar legislation that has been introduced in other states, is a compromise position, right? Which I think is a great compromise. It gives Congress the opportunity to act. For those who are afraid of a constitutional convention, it uses it as a threat.
Almost like a sequester, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
A Citizens United sequester.
Better move, Congress, otherwise we'll do it for you.
Viewers, make sure to support Stop the Citizens United sequester, or if you want to go nuclear and blow it up, then maybe the sequester is your thing. But Ben, how can everyone get progress on all of your different ventures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would urge you to go to jillstein.org and to see the news about the campaign schools that we've been doing around the country, and to find out how a clean campaign gets treated by the Federal Election Commission. We're going through a federal audit. It's lots of fun. But above and beyond that, I would say get involved with the democracy movement work in your community, whether that's with movetoamend.org or whether that's by coming to the Democracy Convention this summer in Madison, Wisconsin, where literally hundreds of organizations, thousands of people who are involved in building a democracy movement are coming together. It's August 7th through the 11th, and you can find out more at democracyconvention.org.
Thanks for watching. I'm Lauren Windsor. Get pulled in to the undercurrent.
Have I been hypnotized to believe in lies with the monologue, questioning God like Habakkuk, cause the odds keep stacking up? Where is the illumination?